Hello again. First hazardous weather graphic here showing a blizzard warning out for tonight until 9 p.m. Friday, so all day tomorrow into tomorrow evening there for the Yukon Delta. Winds gusting to 45 miles an hour with additional 2 inches of snow, so that'll create blowing snow, quarter-mile less visibilities in blowing snow. Possible whiteout conditions there. Otherwise, for the lower Yukon River Valley, eastern Norton Sound there, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast, winter weather advisories out for the same time period as the blizzard warnings out tonight through tomorrow until 9 p.m. tomorrow evening. And for advisory level wind and snow there with the worst conditions over the Yukon Delta. And then for the Kuskokwim Delta, Nunivak Island, Bristol Bay, winter weather advisories out for tonight until 9 a.m. Friday morning. And again, wind and snow, gusty winds blowing snow, reducing visibilities to a half mile at times in these areas, Bristol Bay, Yukon Delta, and also for the eastern Kenai Peninsula into western Prince William Sound, Seward on up the Seward Highway there through Turnagain Pass and into the Portage area there. And again, that's out for the same time frame as the Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Delta tonight through tomorrow morning. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery, can see big low pressure out here over the western Bering Sea, slowly weakening, bringing a lot of snow showers into the Shimiat-2 area, some snow showers into the central Aleutians, or rain and snow showers there, and also some moisture up into the Pribilof Island areas and back across the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, some clouds coming up, kind of with that front pushing northeastward here into the southwest interior, and that's bringing the snow and blowing snow into the area there. Some clouds and a little bit of flurry conditions or light snow showers up into Cook Inlet, south central Alaska, and on up in toward Fairbanks there, and also some showery conditions for the eastern North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle today. Pretty gusty winds on the eastern Arctic coast. Kaktovik had peak wind gusts 46 miles per hour up there with pretty low wind chills, 55 degrees below zero or so, or 45 to 55 below. And there is a winter weather advisory due to the blowing snow with that out until 11 p.m. tonight. Otherwise, pushing this along through again, you can see moisture coming up with the next system here, and kind of another low pressure here just south of the Pribilof Islands on the chart. There it is there, 985 millibars, and yet another weaker system, about 1,005 millibars here, warm front kind of splitting off there, a trough bringing those areas of light snow and snow showers in from Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, right up through the central interior and to the central Arctic coast, and some rain and snow or rain and snow showers over the Panhandle, and then the snow, blowing snow and the increase here in Nunivak Island along the coast of the Yukon Delta, and also some light precipitation moving in to the southern Bristol Bay area, mostly in the form of rain, Alaska Peninsula, the eastern Aleutians, colder air coming in from the west there, so rain and snow showers has turned to snow showers there for Adak and Atka on out to Shimiat-2. And for tonight, low pressure tracks right up to Nunivak Island here. Snow blowing snow, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Delta, Yukon Delta with a blizzard warning out there, spreading into St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound. Some areas of light snow pushing into the across much of southern Alaska, even up in toward the central interior. This will be pretty light up through here, cutting off there as you get over toward the central eastern Copper River Basin, upper Tanana Valley. Dry back to the northwest with still some clearing there over the Noatak Valley, west western Brooks Range, possibly the Seward Peninsula, and pretty dry for the most part over the Arctic coast. Low pressure holding, slowly weakening, starting to drift a little bit to the north and northeast there, but keep it windy out there with numerous snow showers from the central Aleutians all the way back to the Komodorskis. And break here coming into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, weak ridging here as this low lifts northward, and then this other low taking off to the east there. I'll start to dry it out for Kodiak later, kind of maybe some showers later tonight. Rain and snow, North Gulf Coast, snow into south central Alaska, and rain and snow into the northern Panhandle, mostly showery conditions over the southern southeast coast. And then for the day on, Friday, low pressure tracking eastward just south of Yakutat. That's going to keep it definitely unsettled there. Wind's not much of a factor. A little breezy along the coast of the Panhandle with some rain and snow across the entire stretch there. Periods of rain and snow. Snow and blowing snow here over the western interior with this low over the Yukon Delta. And that'll start to improve again with the winter weather advisory ending for Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Delta in the morning hours, drying out in the afternoon with lighter winds as the next system pulls up to the eastern Aleutians and brings more wind, rain, and snow into the Alaska Peninsula and Fox Islands. Kind of a showery day for the Pribilofs. Not much in the way of accumulation of precipitation amounts, pretty light along with the winds. This low finally weakening, pulling up to the north. Less wind, but still a lot of snow showers over the Aleutians and big area of snow and snow showers over the western to central Bering Sea areas. It stays dry from the north slope on up to the Arctic coast. Then on Friday, this system weakened, or for first day of the weekend, this system will weaken into a trough. This low will track northeastward right to about over southwest interior, over the Kuskokwim Valley, and then this trough just a remnants of the original low, and that'll push a front through, so periods of snow into south central Alaska, rain and snow North Gulf Coast, changing to rain and snow showers in the afternoon, and snow showers pushing up across the Copper River Basin, areas of snow, actually snow showers north of the Alaska Range, areas of snow back to the west there, all the way to the Seward Peninsula, up across Kotzebue, Noatak Valley, definitely the Kobuk and Koyukuk valleys, lighter snow in the Koyukuk Valley, and there will be out toward the Selawik area. Another system out here to the west, pushing east-northeastward. Next one in the series here, bringing snow back in toward the Pribilofs in the afternoon, snow pushing into the eastern Aleutians, changing to snow showers, Adak and Atka, back to Shemya and Attu. And this next system will increase the wind, rain, and snow for the Panhandle late in the afternoon, Saturday into Saturday evening. Lows tonight, 20s and 30s for the Panhandle and 5 to 15. Interior Alaska, otherwise 20s for the Kenai Peninsula, and highs tomorrow, mid to upper 30s, Kuskokwim Valley, 20 to 35 for the Kuskokwim Valley, 20 to 35, Bristol Bay, mid to upper 30s, lower to mid 30s here, south central Alaska, and around 20 for the Copper River Basin, upper 30s Kodiak Island, mid 30s to lower 40s for the southeast coast, followed by lows mid 20s to mid 30s for the Panhandle, about 5 for the Copper River Basin, 20 to 25 south central Alaska, and 10 to 20 for the Kuskokwim Valley, 20s for Bristol Bay, followed by highs in the lower 30s Bristol Bay, 20s Kuskokwim Valley, lower 30s south central Alaska, and mid-20s Copper River Basin, upper 30s to lower 40s for the southeast coast. And here, northern interior, below zero everywhere tonight, coldest on the north slope, highs tomorrow 5 to 15, central interior around 11 for Fairbanks, and then near zero up in the Kobuk Koyukuk Valley, below zero for the north slope, near zero St. Lawrence Island, followed by lows 0 to 5 below here for the interior, some areas a little above zero, and then the highs 10 to 15 in the Fairbanks area, and mostly 5 to 15 below for the Arctic coast. And out to the southwest, we've got lows tonight near 20 for that area, upper 20s to mid 30s for the Aleutians, lower 30s around Adak and Atka, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, followed by highs 35 to 40 for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 30s in the Aleutians, lower 30s for the Pribilofs, and lows in the teens for the southwest coast, otherwise 20s, lower 30s everywhere else, followed by highs 35 to 40 for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 30s for these.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Friday morning, we've got IFR stretching across the Bering Sea here, all of the southern interior into the Gulf of Alaska, and most of the Panhandle, then an area of marginal VFR extending north across Susitna Valley, northern Copper River Basin, into the mid and upper Tanana Valley, some IFR over in the 40-mile country, and that marginal VFR extends all the way up to the central Arctic coast, and then out to the west, the illusion is looking pretty good. Some marginal VFR from Amchitka to Shemya, VFR, ADAC on up into Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula for the afternoon. That VFR area kind of shifts up to the northeast here with some more IFR following into the eastern Aleutians and to maybe False Pass and some marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula. But VFR, Aleutian Range, Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, areas of IFR through the central and southern interior. You can see really improving the VFR into the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, and then conditions coming down as that area pushes north almost to the Brooks Range. And for the southeast coast, solid IFR extending all the way up into the central and eastern Copper River Basin, even north of the Alaska Range to just south of Eagle. And then for the day, Saturday morning, get some improvement, a little bit here in the east, still some areas of marginal VFR and IFR, more improvement over the Panhandle, becoming VFR out along the coast. Big area of IFR, northern interior, all the way down, covering the western, almost all of western Alaska here, back down across Kodiak Island and out to the west, across St. Matthew Island, big chunk of the Bering Sea here. Northern Bering Sea, north of the Pribilofs, St. Paul, St. George, marginal, and areas of marginal VFR with some areas of VFR for the Aleutians, marginal for the Alaska Peninsula. And continued improvement here for Saturday afternoon, ADAC into the Alaska Peninsula there, even up toward the Pribilofs. Could see some pretty good VFR there. Mostly IFR, southern Alaska. A little bit of a break here over the eastern interior. A couple of batches of IFR, one up just south of the eastern Brooks Range there, down toward the Yukon Flats for Yukon, and over toward Selawik Valley, Kotzebue, northern Seward Peninsula, Buckland, Deering, and maybe on the Brooks Range there. But pretty good to the south, and then solid IFR again. A lot of moisture coming into the Panhandle there, and that covers all of the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Matanuska Valley, southern Copper River Basin. Anaktuvik and Adigan tomorrow, optimistically Friday going for VFR for both those passes most of the day. Lake Clark and Merrill, look, IFR at times, rainy, same forecast. Up toward windy, marginal VFR. Isabel, IFR at least some point during the day tomorrow. And for Mentasta, better chance of IFR there than there will be for Isabel. And Tanita, IFR. Portage, starting out IFR, improving in the afternoon to marginal VFR. And Chilkoot and White, IFR. For the freezing levels at the surface, north of the Pribilof, south of St. Matthew Island, down to the Aleutian Range, hugging the North Gulf Coast, cutting across the Panhandle again, 2,000 feet south of the state, except catching the Alaska Peninsula there. And moving on to icing. Moisture moving up to the northeast here, so areas of considerable moderate rime icing along the coast of the Panhandle, maybe the eastern North Gulf Coast, with lighter icing amounts here over southeast interior Alaska, spreading into Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, and kind of an elevated threat of icing here from the lower and lower Yukon River Valley and the Delta out across the northern Bering Sea, and then another system with some little bit heavier icing coming into the Fox Islands just south of the Alaska Peninsula. And for the jet stream, southwest flow carrying that moisture just south of the Alaska Peninsula there, up to 160 knots. They're taking a turn to the east across the Gulf, and then right into the Panhandle at 135 knots, and then coming down to 9,000 feet. West-northwest flow, 50 to 60 knots across the Gulf. Diminishing as it blows into the Panhandle. Southwest, 70 knots there, right over the Yukon Delta, lower Yukon River Valley, about 60 knots out of the west, northern Bristol Bay. And at 3,000 feet, west-northwest, 60 knots across the Gulf of Alaska, and 40 to 55 knot west-southwest winds on the south side of the slow over Norton Sound there, wrapping back around to the east at about 40 knots across northern Seward Peninsula, southwest 45 there, and then moderate turbulence all along southern Alaska here, the Aleutians up into the southwest interior and up to the north as well.
Hi, Star Peepers. I'm Trace. On March 1st, Venus and Jupiter will be right on top of each other. But in the meantime, you can watch Venus and Jupiter get closer and closer and closer. Hi. Hit the darkness just after sunset this week and face west. You should see two bright points of light. The one closer to the sun, that's the planet Venus, and it's actually visible in the daytime right now, too. Up and to the left of Venus is Jupiter. But let's skip ahead and see how the two planets are going to shift between now and March 1st. So here's February 15th. On the 18th, and the 21st, there's going to be a close approach of Venus and a slim crescent moon. You may even get Earthshine. On February 22nd, the moon will make a conjunction with Jupiter, but now the fun begins, because on the 25th, the 28th, and then March 1st, wow, look at that conjunction. March 2nd, still great. Enjoy this super tight planetary conjunction and keep looking up.
Hi everyone, my name is Tim Steffen. I'm the Marine Program Manager with the National Weather Service in Alaska region, and I'm here today to talk about exciting marine zone changes which are set to be implemented on March 8th, 2023 across the state of Alaska. Why is the National Weather Service making these marine zone changes? We're looking to provide more specific marine weather information that better represents a given location and improves the accuracy of National Weather Service forecast, watch, warning, and advisory products. The main change we are making with marine zones is adding a new nearshore forecast zone, which will cover the coastline out to 15 nautical miles. There'll be an additional coastal zone, which will run from 15 nautical miles out up to 100 nautical miles. Along with that main change, we're also making additional changes in the eastern Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, the Aleutians, and the eastern Bering Sea. Due to the extent of these changes, most marine forecast zone names and numbers will change across the state of Alaska. Here's a look at the old forecast zones on the left compared to the new ones, which will be implemented on March 8th, 2023. The old zones had a coastal forecast zone, which ran from the coastline up to 100 nautical miles from the coast, with an offshore zone, which ran from 100 nautical miles to several hundred nautical miles from the coast. The new zones will have the near shore forecast zone from the coastline to 15 nautical miles out, colored in yellow there on the map, with a second coastal zone running from 15 nautical miles up to 100 nautical miles from the coast. Additionally, offshore forecast zones will run from 100 nautical miles to several hundred nautical miles from the coast. Let's take a more zoomed in look across the state at some of these changes. We'll start in the Gulf of Alaska. The offshore zone in the Gulf of Alaska will be split, in the eastern Gulf of Alaska will be split into two. Seen on the map there is PKZ 311 and PKZ 312. An important note for mariners in southeast Alaska is that marine forecast zone names, numbers, and boundaries of the inner channels will not change. As we head west into Prince William Sound, the main part of the sound, which used to be one forecast zone, will now be split into three smaller forecast zones. Users in the Cook Inlet area will note that marine zone numbers will change, however, the boundaries will not. Looking at the Aleutians, you will see the near shore forecast zone in yellow running out 15 nautical miles from the coast in yellow. The coastal zone will run from 15 nautical miles up to 100 nautical miles. And you should also note the Pribilof Islands will now have a nearshore zone running from the islands out 15 nautical miles. Heading north into the eastern Bering Sea, you will see in yellow the nearshore zone continuing to run along the coast of the state. We have additionally added a nearshore zone around St. Lawrence Island. And you will also note that the large coastal zone that surrounded St. Lawrence Island has now been broken into 4 smaller forecast areas. Noted on the map is PKZ 850, 851, 853, and 854. Heading further north to the Arctic coast, the main change here you will note is the nearshore zone addition from 0 to 15 nautical miles from the coast. The zone names and numbers of the nearshore and coastal zones will change. However, you will also note the offshore zones labeled PKZ 500, 505, and 510 will not change. To recap, with the extensive changes being made across the entire state to National Weather Service marine zone boundaries, the names and numbers of these zones will change in most areas. Please familiarize yourself with these changes for the Alaskan waters you navigate and the forecasts you use. The National Weather Service in Alaska has created a webpage specifically for these changes. You can visit this webpage at weather.gov/ARH, which stands for Alaska Region Headquarters /Marine. What you will find on this webpage is more detailed information on the changes, including why they were made and what we are looking to achieve with the changes. You will see an official press release from the National Weather Service, as well as important information regarding NOAA Weather Radio listeners. For NOAA Weather Radio listeners using receivers equipped with specific area message encoding, otherwise known as SAME, these listeners will need to add new SAME locations to their receivers prior to March 8, 2023. This is a critical requirement in order to continue receiving automated notifications of special marine warnings. The new SAME location codes can be found on a link on this webpage. Additionally, on the webpage, you'll find several maps, both statewide and of several zoomed-in areas around the state in color and black and white. For higher bandwidth users, you will find links to a GIS map and a story map for additional details on the changes. Points of contact for these changes are myself, Tim Steffen, the Marine Program Manager at Alaska Region Headquarters, as well as my colleague Lindsay Tarduff-Huber, Warning Coordination Meteorologist for Alaska Region. Our email and phone information is on the screen. Thank you for listening today, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on these changes. Safe navigating.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
For Friday, southwest winds 25 knots on the south coast, south to southeast 25 to 30 knots on the north coast. And for Lynn Canal, northern interchannels, winds south at 20 knots, southeast 20 knots for Stevens Passage with some higher gusts. And for Clarence Strait, south winds at 15 knots. And for the day, Saturday, south coast, west-northwesterlies 20 to 25 knots, seas 16 feet. Up on the north coast, west winds 25 knots. And for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay and Stevens Passage, south winds at 15 knots. And for Clarence Strait, south winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Prince William Sound tomorrow, northeast winds 30 knots with 7-foot seas and gales for the North Gulf Coast. Around Middleton Island there, southeast at 40 knots, western North Gulf Coast, west winds 40 knots. And for the Barren Islands, gale warnings also, southwest winds 40 knots and southwest 30 knots for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, north winds 30 knots with 5 to 8-foot seas. And for the day, Saturday, southern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots, northeast at 30 knots for Kamishak Bay, northern Cook Inlet only north at 15. Gale warnings continue for the Barren Islands, southwest winds 40 knots for the day, Saturday, and for the North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, south winds at 30 knots, small craft advisories, Prince William Sound, northeast winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet. Kodiak Island, gale warnings for Friday, south or west to southwest winds, 40 knots, and Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 30 to 40 knots with the gales on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Bristol Bay, southwest winds 40 knots, possible gusts as high as 60 knots with 12-foot seas. And for Saturday for Bristol Bay, winds west coming down to 30 knots, and gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, minimum gales southwest at 35 knots. That extends right up to Kodiak Island, then turning west there, 35 to 40 knots. Eastern Aleutians, winds 25 to 30 knots from varying directions on the day Friday. AKwx, south winds 20 to 25 knots. Become southwest 30 knots here for Amchitka Island. And Kiskadashimia, gale warning, southwest winds 35 knots. Becoming even lighter on Saturday, west winds 20 knots, and then back to 30 knots Amchitka Island, Adak and Atka, all southwest at 30 knots. And for the Eastern Aleutians, south to southwest winds 30 to maybe 35 knots. And for the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta coast, 45 knot winds out of the west tomorrow, but only 20 knots from the northwest along the Yukon Delta coast. Northeast at 20, St. Matthew Island. Southwest at 30 for the Pribilofs. Back around to the northeast at 35 knots there for St. Lawrence Island. And for the day on Saturday, north winds 25 knots, St. Lawrence Island. Becoming light and variable for the Yukon Delta coast, Kuskokwim Delta coast northwest at 20, south winds 25 knots for the Pribilof Islands, and east winds at 20 knots for St. Matthew Island with 9-foot seas. And for the Chukchi Sea on Friday, north winds 25 knots. West or north winds 15 knots for the western Arctic coast, central Arctic coast east at 20, and those winds increase to gales over toward demarcation point to about Kaktovik and Barner Island, east 35 there. For the day on Saturday, some brisk wind advisories here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Easterlies 25 to 30 knots, east to 20 on the central coast, and then in the western Arctic coast, north winds at 15 knots, and from Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales, north winds 25 knots. And for tonight, low pressure tracking into Nunivak Island. Blizzard warning out tonight until 9 p.m. tomorrow night for the Yukon Delta for 45-mile-an-hour winds, and visibility is reduced in blowing snow. Blowing snow also St. Lawrence Island into Bristol Bay. Snow advancing into the south-central interior areas. Rain and snow along the North Gulf Coast. Windy with a lot of snow showers over the western and southwest Bering Sea. And then for tomorrow, this low tracks northeastward, bringing more rain and snow into the Panhandle, becoming showery along the North Gulf Coast, tapering off around the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay as this lifts northward and slowly weakens. Really starts weakening overnight Friday night as this system tracks right up into the Kuskokwim Valley with more snow over southwest Alaska, northward to the Noatak Valley areas.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.